All right, well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our Trailblazers webinar today. My name is Sheryl O'Connor. I'm the CEO and co-founder of IncomeConductor, an award-winning retirement income planning technology that engages your clients in the planning process and delivers income certainty, not probability. Our Trailblazer series highlights the people in our industry who are forging new paths and developing new ways to achieve success while providing great outcomes for clients. We welcome your questions, so please type them into the Q&A box at any time during our conversation, and we'll address them at the end of the webinar. It's my pleasure to welcome our Trailblazer today, Renee Hanson, Private Wealth Advisor with Ameriprise Financial. Renee has more than 35 years of experience in comprehensive financial planning with deep expertise in portfolio risk management, income strategies, retirement planning, and insurance solutions. She is the author of the groundbreaking book, Finding Your Financial Identity, which introduces a human-centered framework for understanding how personal identity shapes financial behavior. Renee has received multiple awards and recognitions for her contributions to the financial services industry, including being named by Forbes as #1 in Arizona on the Forbes Best in State Women Wealth Advisors, Best in State Wealth Management Teams, and Top Women Wealth Advisors. She has been recognized multiple years in Barron's Top 1,500 Financial Advisors list and in the 5-Star Wealth Manager list. Renee was inducted into the Ameriprise Circle of Success Hall of Fame in 2024. Welcome, Renee. It's a pleasure to have you as my Trailblazer guest.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here with you today.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you. So why don't we start out, can you share with our audience the why behind your journey? What attracted you to the advisory business, and how did you grow that business? You were certainly a trailblazer as a woman 35 years ago, going into financial advisory, the career, and also financial planning.
Well, I started out as a stockbroker, fell into the job, and true, there weren't very many women back then. While it's grown to, I guess, a little more than 20%, I was truly a minority at that point in time. And I realized that while I can sell stocks and bonds, I really wanted to provide advice, and so I got my CFP. And how did I build my business? Well, I went to the source, the white pages. And I dialed and I dialed and I dialed. And sometimes I would get to the point that I would just call a name I couldn't pronounce just so I could start the conversation. How I began my business. I did step out for a couple of years when my daughter had had an accident, and then in 1997 began this practice that I have now as a CFP and financial advisor. Growing the practice just like everyone else, knocking doors, making calls, asking for referrals. But what I discovered along the way is that we advisors are really good at summing up situations relatively quickly. We could almost, after a few years, say, I know exactly what we're going to do. And we're so eager to offer how we're going to solve all their problems that sometimes we don't make that connection between the two. We're full of tools. We're taught so many things, our designations, CFP, CDFA, BFA, CEFT, goes on and on and on, all the designations we can have. It teaches us many skills. The question is do we practice those skills on a regular basis? What I discovered along the way is that we were really good at deepening relationships, but not elevating them. And we weren't finding the real common ground between clients and ourselves, where we were having that authentic conversation where the clients knew their financial identity and we also knew their financial identity.
Great. So obviously you've recognized that early on. So although you do have a lot of certifications, you excel in many areas of finance, you seem to have developed a real passion for not only helping your clients be financially secure, but helping them understand their own personal relationship with money. And what I find fascinating is that you've developed this framework. And I was wondering if you could share with the audience the five attributes that you've identified of financial identity and how they integrate to influence a client's behavior and how you use them.
We talk about the designations. I sometimes will start my presentations with what I am, and then I'll say, really, I'm just certifiable. And that way in this business. I do have a passion. The passion is about delivering advice, where I move past performance and I'm helping people not live their life around money, but that money fuels their life. It's years ago, I had a client who wanted to retire, used all my tools, did everything necessary, and we were just at the break even for retirement. And I was so delighted when she retired. 3 weeks, 3 weeks later, and she passed away. Now,
Oh.
her daughter is still my client, but it's like, wow, if we had only known, right? And we don't know. So, how do we help people live life now and live life later and feel good about being able to do both, where they
Mhm.
life center? What I began to discover is that people have attributes around their financial identity, and there's five that I have identified. The very first is a person's money story. The money story is our first understanding of money from an early age. It could be that how they observed their parents behaving. And my parents had two different styles. I don't think that's the reason they divorced, but it could have been one of the factors in
Mhm.
this. Two different styles. One was a spender, one was a saver. Now, that's not an identity, but it is the behavior that I saw in them. I also listened to things and had my first money experience, and we begin to build our life story or money story around what we do and what we observe and how we feel. And we continue to add chapters to that. The next is values. We will operate within the top 5 values, and the Think to Perform Institute, the Behavioral Financial Advisor designation, will teach us that values do drive behaviors in many, many ways. So if we know our top 5 values, and more importantly, as advisors, if we know our clients' top 5 values, we can better understand their behavior during life changes. They're living life and they're experiencing life and they're experiencing changes. And if we understand their values, we're more capable to be able to guide them through life disruptions. Bruce
Mhm.
Feiler wrote a book on life quakes, and we expect to have 5 to 6 major life quakes in our life, and we as financial advisors are the most equipped to guide them through their life changes on that. The next is a client's knowledge or even our own knowledge. We too have a financial identity. We're human also as financial advisors. We have an identity around money. We have a relationship with money too. But the knowledge is what we understand about money. So we understand what a budget is. We might even have the understanding of how a budget works. We might know what a mutual fund is, but it's the knowledge around finances. And this is where a lot of people don't know what they don't know until they learn it. And oftentimes they're intimidated by this universe of knowledge right at our fingertips on the computer, but then they don't know what's relevant and they don't understand. And sometimes it becomes more intimidating that they begin to just shut down from the money component altogether. The next is skill. And the skill ties right into considering if you know what a budget is, can you actually operate to a budget? Now we're implementing skill. I can track my budget. I can begin to see where I might have some challenges. I can identify whether I have a deficit or a surplus, and then I can take action. If I have a deficit, I know what I can do. If I have a surplus, I can then begin to apply to goals that I might have, leading into logging on to starting a 401k, beginning to make the investment decisions, then monitoring, and you see how they can build their skill set along the way. These are skill sets advisors are very adept at and can
Mhm.
do. It's second nature for advisors to be able to do this. It is not for clients for the most part. The next are our experiences. And boy, a good experience can make us feel confident and comfortable in making the next decision. And a bad one can weigh on us for years to come. The bad feels worse than the good feels good. And if you think about going to a restaurant and you have a bad experience, you will remember that and share it 10 times. But how often do you share a good experience? Maybe 3, and only if something jogs your memory to do so. It's interesting how bad things in life can trigger those bad experiences. Something else will trigger it, and you'll just build from there. So I discovered that these were the attributes of financial identity. This will then lead into the 5 levels of financial identity, which are in the book, describing those levels. And people can then manage and evolve their financial identity to the level that they want to.
Mhm.
Most advisors' clients, my clients, don't want to be a financial advisor, but they like to be involved in the decision-making process. They like to have the right information so that they can feel comfortable and confident in aligning their values, goals, and risk tolerance, both investment and life tolerance, so that they can work within the framework of their financial identity and make comfortable and confident decisions, even when they're not in my office.
And I would imagine that those 5 attributes not only build and support, each other, right? But I like the term evolve. So as people experience, market crashes or personal losses, within the family or something, bad decisions, how do you deal with those evolving attributes as you work with clients? Because things can change, right? I always question that risk tolerance number because I saw people behave very differently than what their number suggested when a crisis happened. So,
When we understand their top values, then we can have the conversation. So in my meetings, the second I have written agendas, a PowerPoint is what I use. We call it e-meeting. And the second slide is actually a recap of their top values, a recap of their communication preferences, how they receive and digest information, whether they need graphs or repetition, slow pace, whatever is necessary for them to understand, along with their primary goals. We always start our meetings off with that foundation, and then I can ask them what's been going on, what are they feeling about the economy and their money these days. Okay, there's a lot of feelings going on, and I can almost always tie it right back into the values that they have and why it might feel in conflict with what's going on. And then we can lead to how is this going to influence decisions or make changes in their long-term goals. Most times it's, well, my long-term goals haven't changed at all. So are we talking how temporary is this? Which of course we don't always have a timeline. But what are the things that would cause them to make a decision to change? And what are the things that would cause them to stay? And always aligning it back to their values. So if security is an important value, and they've expressed before that change is a challenge for them, we can certainly understand where they're at, and we can guide them through the emotional component for emotional intelligence to feel good about whatever decision they want to make today, reassuring them that whatever decision they make, we will guide them through living their life.
so this is really a new approach to planning because most advisors, when they have a client meeting, they get all of their charts and reports and, the focus is on the numbers, the performance. And what you're saying is, that's not where you should start with the client. And
Hi.
there's an alternative definition of AI that you brought up in our conversation when we met initially, which is authentic intelligence, which I love.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on what authentic intelligence is and why it's so important to incorporate it into your client meetings, your client relationships?
Yes, advisors, you can learn more from Doug Lennox, who is the CEO of Think to Perform and has written several books. And authentic intelligence, as he says, is refers to the decision-making approach that we have. And it blends the emotional intelligence and moral intelligence, what he calls EI, emotional intelligence, and then the values-based behavior. And this will create the opportunity to have a more genuine and purposeful outcome, both personally and professionally. It's not tied just to the money component of it. And at the core of his theory and approach is, or philosophy, is that true success and influence, it doesn't come from technical skills alone, but it's really from understanding and aligning your core values, and in our situation, then your core attributes for your financial identity. Um, and importantly, he identifies that past behavior, it is a better predictor of
Mm.
future outcomes than past performance. So behavior, think about our clients. When they go to buy a home, do you think it's always a financial decision? It's almost always driven by emotional. But if they have a strong foundation of their financial identity, it creates a different awareness to where they can manage and cope the emotional side of their decision so that they don't live with regret. Overbuy, we've all dealt with clients that have overpurchased. It takes us years to get them past that, right?
Mhm.
So it's a way that people can maintain awareness and have a healthy relationship with money, and can walk away from their decisions saying this is a good decision and it was a strong foundation aligning my values, goals, and risk tolerance.
I love that. And I would imagine that taking this approach makes clients feel a lot more confident when they have to make decisions and you're not there, right? They have to make a snap judgment about something. Having that confidence and knowledge, it must be really empowering for your clients.
It is, and I know that advisors have heard the very same thing, that, we're the best thing that ever happened to them. Sometimes we're the best therapist that ever happened to them. Always relieved when a client calls and says, well, we were out, we thought about this, and before we made a decision, we said, what would Renee do? And I said, I'll say, was I the angel or the devil in this decision-making process? Sometimes I was the devil, and sometimes they've actually walked away from decisions realizing that their goals were more important than the immediate need to buy something or want, right? It's usually a want versus a need. So I,
Because they're so in touch with those goals, because they've talked them through and identified them and been made aware of them. So they're top of mind, right?
when we actually understand what the attributes are, we can become aware. Otherwise,
Hmm.
just dealing with emotions, why am I feeling this? Why do I always make bad decisions? Why can't I make a good decision? Why do I feel regret? What's not working with me and my money? When they have the awareness component, then they can recognize what's going on. One of the things that Think to Perform talks about within the scope of their work is where you recognize what's going on. They call it the 4 R's: recognition, reflection. So recognizing what's going on, that's the awareness component of financial identity. And then reflecting on, how has this influenced me in the past? What have been my experiences? Am I going to be building good experiences or bad? Reframe it within the scope of what's going on currently, where we are emotionally in our life. Are we experiencing life changes that are crazy? And then crafting an appropriate response or decision.
Hmm.
And if we can stop and reflect on these things, the 4 R's, we call it the freeze frame. If we can do that, then we're more inclined to make the right decision that is comfortable for us. It doesn't have to be right for anyone else, but something that's comfortable for us.
So I'm interested how you handle, you've been working with a client for years. How do you handle them making a decision contrary to what you have advised? You go through this process and there's a lot of recognition around and awareness built up and trust, but then something happens and they take a different path. How do you deal with that?
I dealt with that a lot early on in my career, and I really do believe it was because I didn't have real authentic conversations with my clients and asking, I didn't have the appropriate inquiry. How many of us as clients walk in the office, do we say, how are you doing today? Right? And what do they answer? Great, fine, good.
Mhm,
Oh, it was a little hot out today. I'm ready to go home. You don't get a real conversation. It's like
mhm,
asking your spouse, how are you feeling? And they say, fine. That is never the answer we want. Isn't that feelings inside not expressed, right? And so we have to ask different questions. And for a spouse, you might say, okay, I'm hearing fine, but I'm feeling something different. How can I turn that fine into great? What do I need to do to turn that to greatness? The
mhm,
same thing with clients is when you say, what did you do today? What are you feeling about your money when we sit down to have a conversation at our desk? Because then they will say, well, I'm feeling a little like this, and I'm concerned about that. And now we're getting to the core of what's going on. So I always ask the what questions, and I try not to be repetitive and don't ask an obvious question. If someone walks in and says, their dog passed away, be sensitive on how you ask a question. What are you
mhm,
feeling about your dog is not the appropriate answer or question. Tell me what was your favorite thing about your dog. That creates
mhm,
conversation, right?
mhm.
So you don't
Leading.
know the details of the passing, but you can begin to build, go back to their good memories. So I think that is where I really began to elevate the relationship. I worked very hard over the years at deepening the relationship. And deepening is adding value by additional tools, services, or deliverables. My software, I've added Holistiplan, those sorts of things. That
Mhm,
deepens the relationship in terms of why they do business with me professionally. Elevating the relationship is having that collaborative, authentic conversation where the elephant in the room is no longer
mhm,
sitting in the corner, where we can have good conversations between couples and between ourselves that I can then create avenues and suggestions and guide them
mhm,
with good solutions where they can feel comfortable and confident. Now I'm elevating our relationship and I'm making our relationship indispensable. And I think that's the key because all of us can get good performance. I don't think that that's a unique thing. Do I see others not doing so well in that area? Well, yeah, but I would say most of us do okay, as
mhm,
evidenced by the number of clients we all have. And they really don't know what the other advisors are doing in terms of performance. But if they do hear another advisor who is touting better performance and they don't have a solid reason to stay with you, then you might see the assets walk out the door.
mhm,
And I have seen people come to me who say, well, my other advisor didn't offer financial advice, and that's really what we wanted. It wasn't about performance. It was
mhm.
about the services being delivered and the relationship that was being built, the experience of working with us.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So, can you share with our audience um, how they can implement, what steps can advisors take to elevate their own practices? What's some practical advice you would give to our listeners that they could take away and apply to their practices, today or tomorrow?
Well, I would say that most of them along the way, somewhere has had a gut feeling like, oh, I should have asked something. Something's going on. I just don't know what it is. That was
Mhm,
it was the unspoken. So learn inquiry. That would be the first thing that I would encourage is learn inquiry, how to ask the right questions. But I would start with financial identity. One of the things we recently did is that we are sending out the book to our centers of influence, and we're calling it a traveling book. We're asking them to highlight freely, to dog ear often, to write notes in the margin. We've sent along a little notebook if they need to write more, and then pass it along to someone who matters to them most. And make it a traveling copy so that people can have good conversations around money. Imagine the number of families that we have. We have $124 trillion that is going to pass from the baby boomers to the next generation. And
Mhm.
many baby boomers, we've all heard this, is I don't know if they're ready. I just don't know if they're ready. And we also know that 70% of women will leave the practice upon widowhood. And we're
Mhm.
seeing children leave practices as well. So this is a great generational opportunity to share, to give the book or tell them to buy the book. I heard someone say the other day that they bought the book for their advisor. Uh-oh, that might be telling.
A
So
little summer reading.
yeah, I would encourage really understanding financial identity and
Mhm.
appropriate inquiry. Those are the two things. Start slow. Don't turn into an inquisition, but learn how to ask the what question, and then you'll build experiences that work for you too.
Yeah, and I think it's all about partnership, right? You said at the beginning that clients want to be involved. They don't want to just be told. They want to be heard. They want to have a conversation. They want to get these fears out and work through them in a lot of circumstances, with somebody who is competent and also who cares and listens.
Susan Bradley, she wrote a book called Sudden Money years ago, and she's written another book recently. And she she runs the Financial Transitionist Institute. She says when life changes, money changes, and when money changes, life changes.
Mhm.
This is most absolutely true. Years ago, we used to always say, as advisors building our business, go after money and movement. Money and movement is what? Death, divorce, job changes, business sales.
Yeah.
We all know the money and movement. Those are life changes. It's the same concept. So be prepared to guide people through life changes because they're going to have 5 or 6 of them through your relationship with them. And those are going to be important times. And they're not all big changes like a job change or a death. There's weddings, there's births, you know,
Mhm.
lots of fabulous things going on in life. There's athlete contracts, there's books that are being written, businesses being started. There's a lot of fabulous things going on, and we should be there to guide them through it.
Great. So we do have a question from John. How do you convince, in quotes, a client to start moving out of a concentrated position they are emotionally attached to?
Yes, yes, that is a tough one. And I would explore their relationship with they either bought it or they inherited it, would be my guess here.
Hmm.
If they bought it, I would begin to understand what bias is in play. Is it confirmation bias that it went well? But oftentimes people will anchor to that stock. And even when you do sell it and it goes up, because it will eventually, I'll say, I should have held on to it. And the conversation isn't about holding on to it that it would have been better, is what are the alternative investments that might perform just as well, but reduce the level of risk because there
Mm.
will be another market downturn. But try to understand what the bias is. Is it confirmation bias? Is it, a parent who said something to them? We saw a lot of that in oil stocks, right? The inheritance of the oil stocks, the Exxons
Yeah.
and so on. You may see anchoring in SpaceX here soon too, right? Uh,
Yeah,
so
my
I
daughter and husband are multimillionaires overnight there with SpaceX. So
great story.
yeah, employee stock plans specifically, where one of your clients worked for a large corporation. They, as part of their employment, they got company stock. I saw this with my mom. My dad worked for GE as an engineer his whole life. and they were enjoying dividends from GE for quite a while at the beginning of retirement, but then that went south. So, but there was an emotional attachment because my dad had worked there.
Think about objections you might hear. Tax, I don't want to pay the long-term capital gains, but there's always indexing strategies that you can use.
Hmm.
I also think about in my office, people look at me as a financial advisor. Okay. And I view behind me is I have a shelf of product. They don't see that product. If they go into a restaurant and they sit down and say, "May I see a menu?" And the server says, "Tell me what you're feeling right now, and I'll fix something for you." And then they share a little bit. "I have a couple of ideas for you. Let me bring them out." Okay. What we're doing is the same thing. We're not showing a menu. They don't get to see all the wonderful things they have. Now, I know we're not like a restaurant, but it's the same experience they like to see. So we must share with them that we have a lot of different solutions. Let's talk about these solutions and let's see if one is appropriate. Shift
Hmm.
from a sales perspective to you've told me that longevity of assets are important. You've told me that retirement is important. You've told me you don't want to be a bag lady. Whatever they've told you along the way, is my job is to help you see how you can prevent yourself from being there. I believe you have some exposure. Let's talk about some of the solutions. And you might have to talk about it 3 or 4 times, right? But that's how I go about doing it, is digging to the feeling of what's going on with what questions, what causes you to continue to hold this, and let them talk.
Mm,
Try
great
not to
advice.
interrupt. Power of pause.
Yeah,
John,
and,
does that
and
help?
we see this a lot with our advisors who, they have accumulation clients, but then they have clients moving into retirement, and it's really a whole different conversation, right? It's a conversation more focused on spending and enjoying and reaching one's goals versus saving and accumulating and, investing for retirement. It's the other side of the coin.
Yeah.
So that
Employee stock-
conversation.
From the employee stock plan, which he said specifically is just like we dollar cost average in, dollar cost average out, do a little at a
Mhm.
when we have a concentrated position, we will always, and we have it in writing in our deliverables, we'll point out what the position is, whether it's a 10%, 12%, 13%, and we tell them that 10% is considered concentrated, 5% is where you'd like to be, and just do little cells along the way. It's more palatable. It's like wading into the pool, and it's a little more palatable. And then find an alternative and make sure you talk about how that's performing, because I want to see that I make the right decision. And I cross my fingers that you do make that whatever you choose is going to perform equally or as good. But then you can say how you've significantly reduced their risk exposure. Yeah.
Right. But I think it would be easier, I would think it would be easier on your part to have those conversations and accumulate that advice if you really know your client very well,
Yeah.
right? And that's what it's all about. I'm going to throw you a curveball here, Renee, because we're a little bit over time, but something piqued my interest on a Kids' thread this morning. And the question was, what do you do if you've done a financial plan for a client and then they go and they put it through Claude or Chat GPT and there's some conflict there of
Yeah.
advice?
Yeah.
Have you ever experienced that, and how would you address it?
I had one client who did that, went through and says, I came up with some similar results in terms of the numbers. And so I said, "Damn, I'm right. Yes. I'm as smart as AI." And then I returned, I said, "Wait a minute. I did it first. AI is as smart as me. The difference is they don't take you out for a glass of wine or
Yeah,
understand feeling bad about the markets or feeling good about the markets or guide you through when you lost your job and you had to move. That's not AI. We have a relationship, and that's what I stand on."
I love that. So we don't have any more questions and we're over time. I just want to Thank you so much, Renee. I just think what you're doing is really the future of the advice. And with that kind of a planning paradigm and approach, there's no robo or other advisor that is going to come and steal your clients from you. I'm sure your clients are extremely happy. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and expertise in this area. It's been such a delight meeting you and talking with you.
It was a pleasure to know you. I look forward to our continued relationship.
All right, and thank you everybody else for attending today. Be on the lookout for our next Trailblazer. Have a great day.